Welcome to the world of probiotic foods. This is Cultured Food Life with your host, Donna Schwenk.
Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining me. We are going to be talking about IBS and gut bacteria today, which is a very common email that I get from people who are struggling with IBS and wanting to know how their guts are affected by this ailment that seems to be rapidly becoming more common. And irritable bowel syndrome, which is IBS, is usually identified by a group of symptoms such as abdominal pain, bloating, and a change in bowels that can alternate between diarrhea and constipation. Now, my daughter has a story of healing from IBS that I have an article about on my website, and I'll link that in the description below. And it was one of the things that really made me a believer in the power of probiotic foods. She had IBS, but she also had multiple food allergies. And simply by having a cultured food and prebiotics at every meal, she healed her gut and her IBS. And that was, 18 years ago. And I'm going to you can check out her story in the link description below. And it was a pretty powerful lesson for me because that was really something, because it was very early on when we started Cultured Foods, and it really woke me up to the power of these foods. So here's the deal. What does the scientists say about the connection between probiotics and a healthy gut and IBS? Because when we first did this years ago to help my daughter, there was no studies. There was nothing out there that told me that probiotic foods or even probiotics would help her. But in 2014, they began doing a lot of studies, and they took 28 people suffering from irritable bowel syndrome. And some of these participants were asked to consume a fermented milk product, just like my daughter did, for 4 weeks, while others served as a control group. In the people consuming the drink, the fermented milk product, researchers saw an increase in the bacteria that produce butyrate, an acid that is beneficial for gut health. And in response, the symptoms of their IBS also improved, while the symptoms of the people in the control group remained the same. The conclusion drawn in this study mirrored that of the studies done in 2009 with 34 participants, and I have all the research for that if you're interested in that, that those fermented milk products that were loaded with probiotics really helped those suffering with IBS. And that's the same thing that happened with my daughter. There was another study done in Norway that compared 3 groups. 2 composed of people who are suffering from IBS and 1 that had no symptoms of IBS. One of the IBS groups was given dietary advice, and the other 2 didn't get any advice. And many people who also had IBS avoided dairy because their symptoms tended to flare up. The people in the IBS groups who got advice were told to consume fermented dairy that contained probiotics. Interestingly, the people who consumed the most fermented dairy did significantly better than the people who did not. And they reported an improvement in their quality of life and the reduction of abdominal pain. Now, let me explain something to you. Fermented dairy is completely different than regular dairy. It is, all the lactose is gone from it because the milk sugars are eaten out by the bacteria and they make probiotics from that. And it also loads the milk with vitamins C and B, and completely changes the structure of the proteins, the way it's digested. It becomes full of enzymes. It makes it so digestible for the body that it isn't even comparable to regular dairy, because fermentation changes and makes it an entirely new food. Now, prior to finding Cultured Foods, my daughter, who suffered from IBS, and she was 16 at the time, I really was on a mission to help her repair her gut. And she just had all this pain every time she ate. And that's really no way to live. There was very little help from the medical community as to why she developed these symptoms and what I should do about it. But it really led me to discover Cultured Foods and their ability to repair the microbiome and restore her health. I started doing massive amounts of research on the foods that hurt her gut. And the most of them were things like grains, gluten, anything with gluten in it. Regular dairy bothered her. But I really started to realize that just taking the foods out was only a temporary fix. The underlying problem was still there. Why was she suddenly having all these problems when she didn't have them before? And here is what I found. She had trouble digesting grains, which was really a threefold problem. First of all, her gut lining was damaged. She had taken a lot of antibiotics because she had a lot of sinus infections, and they had stripped her of all her good bacteria. Stress, she was having a lot of stress. She was dating some boy, and she broke up with him later on, but that was causing her a lot of stress. And certain foods she was eating lacked nutrient-dense foods that helped repair her gut lining. And so she wasn't eating those nutrient-dense foods that helped her to rebuild her gut lining. The lack of proper bacteria to turn her food into vitamins and fatty acids was causing her gut to change. And there was really nothing to protect her gut lining because she had been on an extremely, very, very low-carb diet for years. And her microbes were in dire need of fiber in the forms of prebiotic carbohydrates, such as fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and grains to thrive and grow. She wasn't eating very many fruits and vegetables. She was, eating very little because she was trying to keep her carbs low, but that was really hurting her. It was like under 20 or 30 carbs a day. So she was starving her microbes, which feed off of fiber. And she was also taking antibiotics. And when your microbes don't have any food, this can cause the pH in your gut to shift. And this shift can favor the growth of less healthy, negative endotoxins producing gut bacteria that reduce the growth of positive bacteria that are more healthy for your gut. Now, that was a statement by Jeff Leach from the American Gut Project. And he stated another thing that's really interesting. As pH shifts, prospects for opportunistic pathogens increase, as do opportunities for gram-negative bacteria like Endobacter, which you can add, when you add all this up, adds a lot more shifts in the microbiome ecology of the low-carb diet or low-carb gut. You most certainly have a classic case of problems in your gut that calls for an imbalance. And dysbiosis can lead to issues associated with inflammatory bowel disease, autoimmune diseases, metabolic disorders, and so on. So that statement from him really helped me because there's a lot of people that do lower carb diets, and I'm not really against them. I just think you need to eat a lot of fiber vegetables that maybe to feed your microbiome. Just don't, leave out those vegetables that are so important for your gut. To feed them and keep them healthy. And this all makes sense to me now since it was the perfect storm. She was a perfectly normal teenager with no food allergies, and suddenly she developed all kinds of symptoms and food allergies that she had never had before. Antibiotics had stripped her of all her good bacteria and left her defenseless. That, along with starving her microbiome with the lack of fiber to feed those microbes, really changed that world within and caused great pain and symptoms that really, really changed the course of her life. And we found that just eliminating the offending foods will eliminate the pain to some degree, but you really, really need to fix your microbiome to reestablish a new inner microbiome to keep you healthy and also to help you restore the missing bacteria that you need to not have food allergies. So let me explain that. So recently, researchers at the New York University Medical Center made really exciting discoveries about food allergies and intestinal bacteria. Not only did they discover why children developed food allergies, but they also found a way to solve it. And this study, which was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, found that young children who were given too many antibiotics early on in their life were at a greater risk of developing food allergies. The researchers identified naturally occurring bacteria in the human gut that keep people from developing food allergies. And if these bacteria are killed by antibiotics, especially early in the life, children become more susceptible to food allergies later on. The scientists tested this theory by feeding antibiotics to young mice and found they were more likely to develop a peanut sensitivity than the control group. When the young mice were given the good bacteria Colostria, it's a very diverse group of bacteria. Like magic, their allergic reactions vanished from the food. And I found that with Maci. It's so interesting. More and more discoveries, and I've seen more and more research. This is just one study. I've seen 4 or 5 more in different parts of the world, in Australia, in Canada, in France. They're all finding the same thing. If you allow the body to heal by putting back that bacteria that's been stripped from the body because of antibiotics or harsh diet, those food allergies go away. And I have seen that again and again and again. And the best way to do that is to have a cultured food at every meal. It really helps. And that's what we did. Now, I want to talk about Fodmap and IBS. One of the things that has been developed for those who suffer from SIBO and IBS is the Fodmap diet. We all know that food choices can drastically impact our health symptoms, especially if we have problems. So it's no surprise that diets are continuously developed for different health conditions, and IBS and SIBO sufferers have a difficult time finding things to eat that don't flare up their symptoms. Professor Peter Gibson at Monash University in Melbourne developed this Fodmap diet to help alleviate symptoms of IBS and ease discomfort. When it comes to the Fodmap diet, avoiding a lot of foods that cause symptoms only temporarily remove the problem. It really doesn't heal the problem that caused all of these symptoms to begin with. And while this diet does reduce gas, bloating, and cramping, you have to avoid a long list of foods that are even beneficial for the body, such as fruits, grains, dairies, veggies. And you have to do that forever if you don't fix the underlying problem. So new findings by researchers point to possible drawbacks. This is what they say, the people who actually developed this diet. There may be potential detrimental effects of this diet in the long term due to potential changes to the gastrointestinal microbiome. Future research should also focus on the relevance of changing the microbiome and ways to liberate the dietary restrictions. So, FODMAP is an acronym that stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, and monosaccharides and polys that are scientifically designed. They're classes of groups of carbohydrates that can sometimes cause gas, bloating, and disruption of digestion in sensitive individuals. Your gut bacteria uses these carbs as a food source and produces hydrogen gas. And without the proper gut flora, they can end up fermenting in the intestines, which leads to signs of IBS or small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, which they call SIBO. So your gut is like a rainforest, and it contains thousands of different microbial species, most of them still unknown to us. If it is destroyed or diminished, say taking antibiotics, it needs to rebuild that diversity to thrive again. Adding probiotic-rich cultured foods, such as cultured vegetables and kefir, helps to rebuild that flora, but it needs to be done with caution when some of these foods are high on the FODMAP diet if you have SIBO or even IBS. Now, the same researchers that developed this emphasize the need to eventually remove restrictions on the diet. That means reintroducing high FODMAP foods while healing your gut. They also emphasize the need to focus on the inner ecosystem of the gut. So let's think about this way. Think of yourself as a park ranger for your gut. If your gut microbiome is healthy, you want to continue to support the beneficial microbes with foods that enhance the flora and inhibit the growth of pathogenic microbes and fungi by limiting their food source. In this way, you would rebuild the strength of the ecosystem and avoid any major disturbances, things like antibiotics or foods and drugs that can harm the balance, which is highly processed foods, sugars, things like that are going to really mess up your gut flora. Okay, so if you're a park ranger of your gut ecosystem and it needs repair, you must first get information about what's going on in your gut so you can help rebuild it and contain those problematic symptoms that really cause you a lot of distress. So this is going to be a journey for you, okay? It's going to take some time. You're going to really start to understand your body and how it works and what it needs, but it's going to be really fun because it's going to serve you the rest of your life. So you first must ask yourself some questions. Has my gut flora been altered with antibiotics or overconsumption of processed foods that have harmed it? Now, 2, what foods are the species in my gut relying on? So if you're eating a lot of processed foods or things like that, then your gut microbes are making more of those gut microbes to feed that. So, and number 3, how stable is your system? Number 4, am I having a lot of bloating and gas or abdominal pain when I eat? So if you have any of these symptoms, chances are something is out of whack and you need some extra support. And if you do have SIBO, which is very different, that's when there's a lot of bacteria in the small intestines where it's not supposed to be. And that can be very problematic. It can cause a whole different set of symptoms for you. It still will cause the gas and bloating, but you need to be careful. And I have a specific thing with specific recommendations for you. And I'm going to put that article below. It's called Fodmap and Cultured Foods, because that's a little bit different than some of the other things that are going on. IBS is a little bit easier than SIBO to handle, but both of them you're going to have to take some time and care and consideration as to what to do. I'm going to get to more of that on the end. But if you have SIBO, specifically check out the article Fodmap and Cultured Foods. Okay, so in my experience, with my daughter who had IBS and countless others who have had IBS, adding fermented foods and a few other things in certain amounts can help heal your gut and speed you on your way to health. But you need to proceed with caution since everybody's different, everybody's an individual, and everybody has food triggers. My daughter had IBS and terrible food allergies before she started cultured foods. They were very bad. She never felt good anymore. Everything bothered her when she ate. It didn't even matter. And it kept getting worse. She kept getting more and more allergic to foods. And if you have any of these symptoms, they are messages from your body that are telling you that your environment within the body is wounded and needs your help. And what we did to repair my daughter's gut was to have a small amount of cultured foods at every single meal she ate. Foods such as 1 to 2 tablespoons of the juice from cultured vegetables or the veggies themselves. A lot of soups will tend to ease symptoms since it contains a lot of bone broth, which is very healing to the gut. And she usually consumed kefir smoothies for breakfast every day and a few ounces, 4 to 8 ounces of kombucha with every lunch and dinner usually. And she also had a lot of prebiotic teas that made her good bacteria grow and multiply. It will help you to, if you have these prebiotic foods, like she had teas that had chicory root in them and inulin and things like that. And we didn't even know at the time why it was helping her, but it was. But that's because it was a prebiotic that made the good bacteria that was in the cultured foods grow and multiply by 4 or 5 times more than it would had we not had them. And I'm going to talk more about that at the end of this broadcast. And if you have a cultured food at every meal, it's going to help you digest and get more nutrients from the food you eat with it. So let's say you eat lunch and you have a cultured food with it. You're going to receive much more nutrients from that food, say it's a sandwich, than you would if you didn't have cultured foods, because it's going to allow those enzymes that are in the cultured foods to allow absorption, to get more nutrients from it, and it's going to really help you with digestion. So that was the other reason that we had a cultured food with every meal. So here are the foods that I recommend and supplements that can help you in specific amounts to help you rebuild your microbiome. But honestly, guys, really remember to listen to your own body because everybody's different. This is just our journey, and I've helped a lot of people, and they've had very similar journeys to mine. But it will teach you so much, and it will help you to start to believe that wellness is the norm, and it will help you to understand how your body works in such a spectacular way that it really will serve you the rest of your life. Okay, number 1, cultured kraut or vegetables. Maci ate a lot of fermented cabbage. Cabbage especially was very helpful for her. But those on the Fodmap diet might want to try purple cabbage kraut because sauerkraut made with green cabbage is a little bit higher for those with SIBO. But it's because it has mannitol in it, which is a sugar alcohol, and it belongs in the poly group within the Fodmap acronym. So red cabbage that is fermented is low to moderate on the Fodmap if you're struggling with SIBO. So, but Maci did fine on green cabbage. It just depends on your specific needs. But different cabbages have different carbohydrate compositions. They ferment in different ways. And so if you really have a lot of severe symptoms, the red cabbage kraut might be better tolerated by you. But just, give it a try and see how you do. 1 spoonful with the meal would be the recommended amount to start with. See how your body responds. And I love to add fresh ginger to mine if I'm making, and I show you how to make these purple ginger. I have a purple ginger kraut that has ginger in it that would be very helpful for you. And I'll put that description. You can go to that webpage, and I have all the recipes on that page. And I have so many other cabbage recipes. I have, 300 or 400 recipes on my website that would really help you. Now, the second food is kefir. Kefir contains over 50 probiotic species of good bacteria and yeast, and it is 99.9% lactose free. So it doesn't have any lactose in it if you're worried about that. This was something that Maci religiously had every day when trying to heal her IBS. She never missed a day. Lactose, which is in milk, is high on the Fodmap diet and has disaccharides. But since fermentation removes most of the lactose, it's a much better probiotic-rich food to add to your diet. Goat's milk kefir is very low on the Fodmap diet and is loaded with many health benefits because it has a prebiotic in it that is very healthy for the gut. It's less allergic. It allows your body to absorb a lot of nutrients. Regular milk kefir is good too, but goat's kefir I think is a little bit better. It doesn't get thick like regular milk kefir. Stays rather creamy. That's due to the proteins and the fat structures in the goat milk. But there's this protein in most cow milk called alpha-1 casein that many people are allergic to. So not all cows produce this A1 casein. The milk from A2 cows produce none of these inflammatory effects that A1 casein does. So goat's milk primarily contains only A2 casein, making it protein-wise the closest milk to human breast milk. Now, another alternative is coconut kefir or rice kefir, which is very low on the Fodmap diet and gives you a lot of probiotics as well. A lot of people do really well with that. You can also buy A2 milk now to make kefir with, which I really recommend. First of all, it is delicious. I've seen it at the grocery stores a lot. It's called A2 milk, and that also doesn't have the casein. So that would be a great one for you to make kefir with. We didn't have that around when we were doing it, but that's a really good one to start making kefir with. Start with a few spoonfuls at a meal to see how you do. Maci had about a cup a day, but we kind of went full head into it, and she did great with it. But you might want to start with less amounts and to see how you do to make sure you don't have any reactions. And having a cultured food at every meal, especially with kefir having so many probiotics in it, will help you rebuild your microflora and will allow easier digestion of the food you eat with it. And I have on this link description below how to make milk kefir, how to make goat's milk kefir, how to make coconut kefir, and I'll see if I can find that one. I think I've got a link that shows you where the A2 milk is too. It's readily available in a lot of places now, even at regular grocery stores. Okay, now let's get to sourdough bread. According to the Monash University, where they developed the Fodmap diet, the levels of fructans in sourdough breads are reduced during the sourdough fermentation process. And this is because the yeast ferment the fructans during the natural leavening process while the bread rises. Typically, the dough should be allowed to rise for around, I usually say 7 hours, but if you're having a lot of problems, 12 hours would be better. And if you make my sourdough breads, you'll find this to be the perfect fermentation time because I usually ferment mine for about 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours is usually what I do. And I can do it longer if you need to. So my daughter did very, very well on sourdough breads when she had IBS, but did not do well with any other types of breads that were not fermented. She couldn't handle them at all. They made her very sick. So she started with like maybe 1 or 2 slices a day. I think she started with 1 slice. That didn't bother her. But always see if you have a small amount. See how you do because you may be super sensitive. You may not even be able to handle breads that have been fermented. Sometimes you can do really, really long fermentation times. Place your dough in the fridge. It's a whole other podcast. But you can ferment them for 24 and 36 hours. And honestly, people do fabulous on those breads. But that's a whole other thing. But anyway, just go slowly. We have things like spelt and einkorn bread do so much better. They're ancient grains. Einkorn is the most ancient grain there is. A lot of people with gluten problems, because it's missing that protein that causes gluten allergies, is missing from einkorn bread. That could help you tremendously because I teach people how to make einkorn bread. I teach people how to convert their regular starters to einkorn. Now I even have a dehydrated einkorn sourdough starter because I had so many people asking me for it. It's wonderful for people who are struggling. But once again, be careful, start slowly, see how you do. It has a completely different molecule makeup than gluten and modern wheat. Actually, all wheat comes from einkorn wheat, and all the wheat was crossed with goat grasses that created the wheats we have today. But einkorn is the original wheat, so it's much easier on the gut. It's easier to digest. It's better on your blood sugar. They don't even test. It doesn't even have when they test for gluten allergies, it's missing that protein in this wheat because it doesn't exist. So a lot of people who have gluten allergies do great on it. So, and I have all that information again on the description. And I have the article that has all this information. So, because it's a lot of information, I know that, but I wanted to give you all that I can, and then you can read it and look at it. I have it laid out in a pretty easy way for you to find what you need. We try to put things in a way that makes it easy to read and find the things that you're looking for. Okay, kombucha. Kombucha is a fermented tea and has Saccharomyces boulardii, which has actually been used to treat all sorts of bowel disorders, including C. diff, acute diarrhea, antibiotic-associated diarrhea, parasitic forms of diarrhea, and gastrointestinal disorders. It has a record of reducing the symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome, and many people, including my daughter, have found kombucha to be of great help when she had IBS. She had 4 to 6 ounces with a meal, and sometimes she did that twice a day. And the full serving of kombucha may not be suitable for you at the beginning, for those who do not tolerate fructans, but no two people are alike, and so your microbiome is just like a little fingerprint. And this is a great way for you to listen to your body and allow the healing to come with wisdom and with you experimenting, seeing what you can handle and what you cannot. I think that drinking plain kombucha is best, and maybe not the fruit flavor versions. That's what Maci did. But you experiment, see how you do. She just drank the plain straight kombucha and she loved it. It was very comforting to her. So that is another thing for you to try. Now, enzymes. Taking digestive enzymes can really help regulate the chemical reactions the body uses to digest food. Enzymes break down the food into nutrient pieces that are small enough to be absorbed into the bloodstream and carried throughout the body. Digestive enzymes help the body break down fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, and this can help promote all kinds of, give you all kinds of digestive help and eliminate or give you some relief from symptoms of IBS. I have several enzymes and supplements available through my store on culturedfoodlife.com, and it can be really a great help if you take it with meals. Now, you can get enzymes at any health food store, and even grocery stores have them. Just make sure you get one that helps you with digesting fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. Those are the best. Take them before a meal. And because remember, you're not just what you eat, you're what you digest. And so if you're really struggling with this, I highly recommend you take enzymes. It will help you digest the nutrients you need to heal. Okay. Now, another thing that I love is miso. Miso is a fermented soy food that is loaded, and it can be made with other things besides soy. I always get the ones made with chickpeas or different beans, and I love it. It's delicious, but it is loaded with enzymes and microbes. There are so many microbes in miso that scientists haven't isolated them all yet. That's what is so interesting about miso. And during the fermentation process, you get a load of B vitamins in miso, which you're going to greatly need because you need more B vitamins because it helps your adrenals. It helps boost your immune system. And the abundance of B vitamins in miso is likely increased from the lactic acid bacteria that's in miso. This is just going to strengthen your microbiome, give you a delicious food to consume as often as you like. I love miso. I have a lot of recipes for miso soups. I make all kinds of things with misos. I will mix miso into peanut butter and scoop it out, or to any kind of nut butter and scoop it out on apples. And I have recipes all over my site. Just type in miso and you'll see them. And you can just do a spoonful in a little bowl of soup that's not super hot. And this will just stir it in with some broth and maybe some veggies in there. And it's going to be very soothing to the gut. It's going to give you a lot of B vitamins, and it's going to encourage your microbes to grow and thrive. Now, last and not least, prebiotics. Those are the thing I was talking about earlier. Maci began drinking a tea that soothed her gut. And then she drank it every day, several times a day. And I later realized that this drink had many prebiotics in it, which is food for your bacteria, which allows it to grow and multiply. It was feeding the good bacteria in her gut, and we just drank it because she liked it. I didn't know that it was a prebiotic. But the combination of cultured foods consumed with every meal, along with this prebiotic tea, made her gut heal, and her food allergies went away. All of them were gone within a year. In the first 3 months, everything got so much better. We were shocked. And her IBS eventually just went completely away. And that was probably in 4 or 5 months, it was completely gone. So prebiotics are super important in the forms of veggies, fruits, prebiotic teas. We have a prebiotic supplement called Prebiotic Plus that we mix into our kefir, or we'll mix it into we'll sprinkle it on salads or in our tea. But it's also in fruits and vegetables. It's just in a very strong concentrated form. If you have SIBO, I wouldn't recommend taking that right away because it can ferment in the small intestine. So you probably need to stay away from prebiotic supplements and follow the very specific diet until you start to heal and do better, because it could get pretty gassy for you. But for other people, for people who have IBS that don't have the SIBO, which is the small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, this would be maybe a great supplement for you. Maci took it a lot. She had it in, it's inulin and FOS, which is fructooleosaccharide, which is a very strong prebiotic, which is made from chicory root, leeks, onions. It's all made from natural sources. Jerusalem artichokes. It's made from these things. You get high amounts. I just had a tea that was made from chicory root. That's a great thing to have if you can find that. And there's many brands, and I have them in the link description below that have these special teas that have these prebiotic fibers in them. They're so good for your gut. So I hope this helps. I know it's kind of a lot of information, which is why I did an article too, so you wouldn't have to just listen to me and try to remember. I try to do that with most of my podcasts and with my articles. I have a way to listen to it. I have a way to read it so that you can help you get the answers. And then if you want to go find the specific things I talk about, I have them all linked in the description. So you just have to head on over to my website and type in, go to the podcast, and then you'll see below it, you'll see the article that is associated with it. I really want you to find some healing for your gut, because I know how devastating IBS can be. It's so debilitating. And I watched my daughter suffer so greatly from it, but nothing was as wonderful as when the healing occurred and we did it ourselves. And it was just with food. And that is so exciting to me, that the body has powerful medicine that can heal and make well. And I want you to know that too, because once you discover that, you are off and running. Those chains fall off of you and you are set free. Your life changes dramatically, and you'll help so many others find the way too. Thanks for listening, guys, and we hope to see you next week. As always, I hope that these foods will make and heal and help you to be well and bring joy back into your life as they have done with us. Thanks again, guys. See you next time.